Wait, we're still in my room. What the heck? I thought we were supposed to be at the location of the...
So this is where you've been all this time. You think you're gonna be the universe's savior? They'll only remember you as its destroyer.
So you're the one behind all this?
I'm just here to finish what the Order started.
I don't think you know this already, but the Order of the Key has been defeated.
Is that so? What if I told you I was the last of the Order of the Key?
Well, you're a couple months too late. Wait, hang on a sec. Who are you? What's your name? Why are you doing all this all of a sudden?
Name's Zandrew. I'm not only a member of the Order of the Key, but I was also responsible for sending you money to review Blair Witch 2. The copy that I sent to you was cursed, and I knew you'd be the perfect target, but I guess I underestimated you.
And how the hell did you manage to find my blaster? I thought I... Oh.
Found it in a parking lot after the battle. I saw its full potential and then turned it into a super bomb, which allowed me to wipe out the entirety of this city. But unfortunately, you and your friend there managed to stop it in time. Looks like she's getting a little tired there.
And what about you? You're just gonna die with us?
It's better than experiencing this hell we call living.
Yeah, okay, long legs. That's what you want.
It is time that I finally fulfill the end goal of the Order of the Key!
Activate self-electrocution.
Wait, what?
Fucking dumbass. Long ago, before the Common Era, and the battle between Malachite and Aeon, there was good, and there was evil. There was darkness, and there was light. And that light was represented by a man named Jack. Jack had fought darkness throughout his entire life, and Jack knew that if he let darkness win, the world that we see today would never be the same. And eventually, Jack had vanquished the beast and banished him from this realm. But only time will tell when darkness would return. And as time passed on, so did the man named Jack. But his life would later be reincarnated into the present day. And soon, he would find himself battling darkness once again in the form of Gabor. So everybody knows about the nostalgia critic or the angry video game nerd, but have you ever heard of Big Jack Films?
Who?
What? Launching his channel in the year 2013, Big Jack Films specialized in reviewing King Kong related media. But his channel became more than that, as he not only embarked in various misadventures, but unraveling his lore, he is by far the most important character within the Reviewerverse. Let's take a trip back in time, shall we? Somewhere in 2005, a young boy named Jack was obsessed with escapist fiction. So much so that he would devote his life to traveling these worlds, interacting with its many characters, gaining extraordinary powers, and even finding love. All of this seemed like nonsense, but for Jack, it was a possibility. And eventually, he would befriend the one and only Dr. Terawat, and the two became very close friends. Dr. Terawat was the Doc Brown to Jack's Marty McFly. Their bond was so strong to the point where Dr. Terawat finally gave Jack the very thing he dreamt of, being able to travel through fictional universes. Dr. Terawat invented the Fictional Dimensional Transporter, aka the FDT. This machine can allow you to travel through various fictional universes, from the Marvel Universe, the DC Universe, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Inuyasha, etc. All by inserting a physical copy of a movie or TV show. But Dr. Terawat and Jack's plans were foiled by the arrival of the Department of Metahuman Control, led by Dr. Gabor. Not wanting his dreams to be crushed, Jack jumped into the FDT, never to be seen again. He found himself in an alternate dimension, where he came across a wizard by the name of Cedric. And since then, Jack traveled through these fictional universes, making alliances, finding love, making enemies. But due to his travels, this caused his age to remain in a purgatory state. But despite his youthfulness, Jack knew he had to return to his native universe, because a war was about to brew. as darkness was freed from its seal in the form of the villainous Gabor. Gathering allies from across the multiverse, Jack led them back to his home universe, and the Great War of 2005 commenced. The war lasted an entire month, and Jack was victorious, and banished Gabor once again. Despite the battle's epic proportions, Cedric the Wizard created a spell that caused everyone around the world who knew of the battle's existence to forget. Henceforth why the battle was never referenced again within the Reviewerverse. As Jack's allies return to their original universes, Jack and Dr. Terawatt seek refuge up north, where they would remain there for years to come. But like I said, in 2013, Jack would decide to create a YouTube channel where he would devote his life in reviewing King Kong related media and other films and TV shows that he was interested in as a child. And thus Big Jack Films was born. But despite years of peace, comfort, and joy, it wasn't until 2012, with the arrival of the plot hole. The plot hole's significance not only tempered within the Reviewerverse, but it also reawakened Gabor. Throughout Gabor's imprisonment, he was energizing himself, ready to attack when he inevitably returned to defeat Jack and many reviewers who stood in his way. But while he was imprisoned, he sent many villains across the multiverse to do his dirty work, henceforth why many fictional villains you see throughout the entire Reviewerverse seemingly pop up without any reason, from Terrell, General Zod, Bugs Bunny I guess. But other than that, you can thank or blame Gabor for the reasons for why all these strange anomalies keep happening within the Reviewerverse. Despite all of that, Jack had his own problems to deal with. Jack's house was attacked, destroyed, but he luckily survived. This caused Gabor to send in Cobra Commander to confront Jack and eliminate him for good. Unfortunately for the Commander, Jack had the upper hand and Cobra Commander retreated. Yeah, like I said before, Jack has made a lot of enemies, especially within the realm of fiction, and this won't be the last time we'll ever see a familiar face encounter Jack. Although Jack remained victorious, it only got stranger from there, such as the time when he reviewed one of the King Kong video games based around the Peter Jackson film of the same name. It was the DS port of the game, which was modified by Dr. Terawatt. Unbeknownst to Dr. Terawatt, the game was laced with a curse, placed by Gabor. And while Jack was reviewing the game in a very angry fashion, his response to the terrible video game was to eat the cartridge, which then transformed him into Were-Kong. Were-Kong caused terror across Toronto, causing chaos and destruction wherever he went. Thankfully, the Were-Kong was put down. Jack reawakened in his human state, but knew that he needed to control his Were-Kong abilities. Thus, he left his universe and traveled through the FDT, where he would find himself in the Rosario Vampire universe in order to train and maintain his powers. I also forgot to mention that throughout all of that, Jack was in a relationship with Android 18 from the Dragon Ball franchise. This is also something that I wanted to mention in regards to Jack's character. He's kind of a ladies' man, not the James Bond type of way, but more of a Austin Powers type of way. Here are some of the fictional female characters that he somehow has a relationship with. The aforementioned Android 18, Kikyo from Inuyasha, Mocha from Rosario Vampire, and probably many more. Jeez, this guy has a whole ass harem. How come I don't have this many women in my life? Or men? I'm bi! By my fucking self! Now, while Jack travels to Yokai Academy, let's talk about another reviewer, Zandrew Productions. Zandrew is well known for his reviews of Super Sentai, but it's within his ongoing story, Zandrew Adventures, in which we get to learn more about his character and the world around him. Just like Big Jack Films, Zandrew is a warrior in his own right, skilled with the blade, hand-to-hand combat, as well as having an arsenal of toys that actually function as real weapons and tools. Zandrew is aided by his best friend Commander Non-Ninja, and the two embark on a really weird misadventure that involves creatures known as shadows who infiltrate their house and cause chaos all around. These shadow creatures have the ability to embody various clothing, cosplay material, and even cardboard to embody a host, and utilize it to combat Zandrew and Non-Ninja. Thankfully for Zandrew, he created an anti-barrier to keep the shadows away. But this only caught the attention of the man who's orchestrating these shadows in the first place, a man by the name of Vane. In Season 2 of Zandrew Adventures, they now come across a new threat, creatures and monsters from alternate dimensions. Ranging from weirdly shaped monsters to pirate mob bosses, these monsters keep appearing through portals that keep leaking through Zandrew's house. Realizing that they need to up their game, Zandrew invents a security robot in the form of Adorable, aka Dora, who ends up becoming a part of the Zandrew family in the form of his daughter. This is where we're also introduced to the magnificent Professor Y, a scientist called in by Commander Non-Ninja to help aid in their fight against these monsters. The anti-barrier is mysteriously removed from the Zandrew household, which we'll get to much later. Suddenly, a being known as the Summoner enters in front of the family and begins to attack, utilizing the various deceased monsters as host. But the family manages to defeat all of them, which causes the Summoner to unleash his ultimate form. Zandrew utilizes a proton pack to keep the monster at bay and defeats it. However, Zandrew then finds out that the anti-barrier is missing, and Vane eventually returns as the two battle for the very first time. Zandrew then transforms into the X-Ranger and tries to defeat Vane to no avail. Vane is just too strong for Zandrew to handle, and he is eventually rescued by Non-Ninja and the two escape. Despite an anticlimactic end, Vane vows to return one day to eventually defeat Zandrew for good. And that's kind of it for Zandrew's lore for now, as we'll cover Season 3 later on in this video. Coming back to Big Jack Films, Jack eventually returns from Yokai Academy and comes back to his native universe. Losing all motivation to continue his review series, his best friend Brad, as well as many others, convince Jack to continue his review series. And Jack does so in the form of reviewing King Kong fan films. Throughout this portion of the video, this is where we get introduced to Brad, who's the host of the 16-Bit Show, and Captain Nick Jackson, leader of the Ultra Guard, as well as the future captain of the SSS Kaiju Guard. At some point in Jack's career, he is then confronted by Capitan Roth. Lucky for Jack, Zoro is also present and the two battle against Capitan Roth and his army. Sending them away from Jack's dimension, Jack and Zoro live to see another day. But that day ends up getting more complicated afterwards because now Jack has to deal with the fucking Empire from Star Wars. The arrival of the Empire was actually foreshadowed within Hope Rises, as a strange fictional wave was beginning to brew within the universe. And of course, it opened up a portal in which the Empire came out of. This led to a hostile takeover of the entire planet led by Darth Vader and his clone troopers, as they took over Big Jack Films' headquarters, all the while Big Jack was reviewing the original trilogy of Star Wars. Jack is then saved by his friend Josh, who they use the Millennium Falcon to escape Jack's base and head out into the far reaches of the universe due to a telepathic message that Jack received from a friend of his by the name of Rice Duke. In order for Jack to convince the Jedi Order to follow in his commands in order to defeat the Empire who are taking over his planet, he must follow the ways of the Force. Finally unleashing his full potential, he leads the Jedi Order back to his native universe as they do battle with the Sith army. And we see Gabor donning a new outfit during the Battle of Toronto. Bradley and Captain Nick Jackson also join the battle, as Toronto becomes a battleground for the Jedi and Sith. Jack and friends are yet again victorious and scare off the Sith and Empire, and only time will tell when the Empire will eventually return. After the big battle, Jack is then met by Isaac the Media Hunter, a fellow reviewer who specializes in reviewing media related to animals. Isaac discovered Jack through another reviewer by the name of Huey Toonmore. Huey is very interesting as he's been reviewing since 2008 and has collabed with other reviewers before, such as... oh, shoot. What was his name again? Never mind. But anyways, Huey is known for reviewing animated media, and his signature catchphrase...
see the movies. Anime movies, that is.
He will be very important to learn about later on in this video. Coming back to Isaac the Media Hunter, you may realize that he's unlike other reviewers that we've covered, because he's actually a dark elf from the world of Warcraft, literally, and also has a snow leopard companion by the name of Loki. With Jack and Isaac making their presence known, their alliance will later be important to discuss later on in this video. As for Captain Nick Jackson, due to the Empire's invasion of planet Earth, Jack enlists the help of other reviewers such as the aforementioned Captain Nick Jackson, JT is Reborn, and Kaiju Network to form the SSS Kaiju Guard, where they monitor the entire universe in case threats like the Empire seemingly arrive to Earth and cause a problem for Jack and humanity as a whole. It's actually worth mentioning that the SSS Kaiju Guard has the same exact interior design and technology based around the ones that we saw in the Atop the Fourth Wall movie and To Boldly Flee. As explained by JT is Reborn, that the SSS Kaiju Guard and even his car were built with the same type of technology after the plot hole consumed the Earth. Coming back to Big Jack Films, during his review of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, he crash lands on Site B where he discovers documents of the King's Gauntlet, a mysterious artifact that once belonged to a creature that no longer exists. And the last known location of the King's Gauntlet just so happens to be on a mysterious island. But that becomes a story for another day. Yes, I know I'm holding off a lot of this information from you guys, from reviewers, OCs, and story arcs, but again, this will all be building up very soon. We have 13 minutes into this video. Come on guys, just be patient with me. Coming back to the Battle of Toronto, most of the technology that was left behind was later confiscated by the US government. Within the same news broadcast, we soon find out that Dr. Terwat has been missing for a really long time. So, where was he? We learned through this broadcast that Dr. Terwat used to work with a doctor who used to work in a hospital. It was rumored that they were conducting human experiments, which were brushed off. The person that Dr. Terwat was working at the time was revoked of his license. But it wasn't because of the rumors, and because of that, nobody knows who this person was. But I do. This individual was Dr. Gabor. Dr. Gabor just so happens to be, and if you've caught on with his name, he and Gabor are one and the same. Kind of. Dr. Gabor is basically his human form, and Gabor is his actual form. Reincarnation, yada yada yada, you get the idea. We also learned that after Jack fell into the FDT, Dr. Terwat was eventually released by the Department of Metahuman Control. And after his release, he became an internet celebrity. We find out that later on, Dr. Terwat unrevealed his latest invention, which is a mech suit called the Mechanolith. But the unveiling of his new suit is then interrupted by Professor Skull. A violent battle ensues, which almost causes Dr. Terwat to die. Thankfully, he survives and lives another day, but goes off the grid once again. Let's take a break from Jack and talk about another reviewer who debuted all the way back in 2016, IndieFan, host of Fandemic. This is a review series that focuses on fan-made projects and other internet-related content. Indy was just your average ordinary reviewer. He's actually blind, but he utilizes special sunglasses that allow him to see the world. Wanting peace and nothing more, all of a sudden, a mysterious package arrives in his doorstep, and it's revealed to be a hell gun. And during one of his reviews, out of frustration, he uses the hell gun not knowing of its function, which opens up a portal in which he falls through hell. He eventually comes back to his original realm. The use of the hell gun allows IndieFan to transport himself into the home of a scientist by the name of Dr. Shelby Newton, but is then intercepted by an assassin by the name of Silverwolf. During the battle, IndieFan accidentally or purposely shot off one of Silverwolf's eyes. But things only get a little complicated for IndieFan as he's thrown into a Phoenix Wright-style trial for a crime he obviously never committed, which he eventually was acquitted for, but this only got him the attention of the US government. Throughout Indy's various misadventures, he would use the hell gun to transport himself to various dimensions, like coming across an individual by the name of Ask That Man in the Shades. IndieFan would soon come across Silverwolf once again and would flee to Canada, where he would find employment as a janitor for an all-wizards school. This didn't go well and he was eventually fired, but then he was later recruited by a G.I. Joe-styled organization by the name of the Vanguard, who during his time working with the Vanguard ran into a smuggler by the name of Dean, who the two eventually became good friends, as Dean himself would eventually become a co-host for Fandemic. And during his first interaction with Dean, this is also where we come across one of IndieFan's most deadliest villains of all time, Bartender Monkey. And this was all from season 1 of Fandemic?
Someone call 911, holy shit!
Around January of 2019, Dr. Tara Watt invented a modified power glove for Big Jack Films. This is also around the same time where Android 18 utilized the Reality Breaker, with the help of Doc's assistant, Professor Poindexter. The Reality Breaker allowed Android 18 to finally have a 3D look. And yes, this was also a pretty crazy ass year for Jack as well, because Perfect Cell from Dragon Ball literally attacked Toronto. On top of that, Rita Repulsa also comes into town, and Big Jack assembles a group of reviewers to stop her, as they all transform into Power Rangers to defeat Rita Repulsa with the aid of Linkara. But this is also around the same time where Jack needed the help from other reviewers as well as beings from other multiverses, knowing that another great war was about to happen. This is also around the same time where reviewer Huey Toonmore's soul was removed from his body. And throughout these 3 years, he did not do a single review, aside from a few collabs that is. Huey needed to figure out what was going on and why his soul was removed from his body, so he seeks help from other reviewers to try to find an answer. And while Huey's soul was traveling through one reviewer to another, that's where the COVID-19 pandemic happened. And because of that, a lot of reviewers were on lockdown. During this time, this is where Jack encountered the character of Dr. Ratchet Von Stone, an assistant psychiatrist of the Department of Metahuman Control. He's also secretly a Nazi. Dr. Ratchet Von Stone and the rest of the Department of Metahuman Control are very interested in trying to take down Jack as well as confiscate his technology. And Dr. Ratchet Von Stone goes through various lengths to try to hinder Jack. Around this part of the timeline within the Reviewerverse, this is very important because this is where a lot of the reviewers like Big Jack, Indie Fan, Huey Toonmore, and Media Hunter all seemingly collide within this big narrative. Remember how I said that Dr. Insano is sort of the Thanos of the Reviewerverse? Well, I kinda made a joke out of it, because theoretically, Gabor is technically their Thanos. Cause literally, he's got beef with everyone, not just Big Jack Films. He's got beef with Bradley, Indie Fan, and the rest of the crew. And with Jack under house arrest, Jack contacts the rest of the reviewers and informs all of them to do whatever it takes to take down the department, even if it means losing their lives in the process. Coming back to Fandemic, because Indie Fan's various encounters with Silverwolf and other foes, Indie decides to install a modified Rob the Robot who is willing to defend his house. And it's through one of Rob's encounters in which Dean arrives at Indie's house. The two decide to do a collab review, but after the review, they are then locked inside Indie's room, and the culprit behind it just so happens to be an alien by the name of Crocodar, who forces them to watch the Power Rangers fan film by Adi Shankar. Thanks to the installation of the bodyguard Rob the Robot, they managed to power Crocodar and his lackeys made up of Indie's past foes. Our heroes defeat Crocodar and his lackeys, and Crocodar is then summoned by an intergalactic empire in which they reprimand him for his failures. And Silverwolf just so happens to be the one to help finish the job. Coming back to Huey Toonmore, he then reaches out to the Hardcore Dude, formerly known as the Hardcore Kid. Concerned at whoever did this to him, he warns the other reviewers and tries to tell Hardcore Kid to reach out to Big Jack to figure out who is responsible for extracting his soul from his body, concerned that other reviewers might fall victim to it as well. Hardcore Kid will also be very important to the storyline as he will help Jack in a very big way. But things aren't looking good for Big Jack Films and Bradley as they accidentally summon Imhotep from the Brandon Fraser Mummy movie. But it's okay, they defeat him. But it doesn't stop there. Dr. Gabor makes his presence to Big Jack, and afterwards, the Department of Metahuman Control take over his base of operations. But Jack doesn't back down. Attempting to jump into the FDT, unfortunately it is destroyed by the Department of Metahuman Control, but utilizing the modified Power Glove's abilities, he transports himself away from the carnage. And thus, Big Jack Films officially goes on the run once again. Also forgot to mention, prior to all that, Big Jack Films collaborated with the Angry Video Game Nerd, which is probably one of the biggest crossovers he's ever done for his channel. And with Jack on the run, let's go back to Zandrew Adventures. In Season 3 of Zandrew Adventures, Zandrew is still on edge with his battle with Vane. It had been 2 years since his encounter with the villain, and he's still shaken up by it. However, the shadows return, as well as the monsters from the different dimensions. However, there's something bizarre with their intentions of their return, as if they're not going after Zandrew, but going after something else. Zandrew, with the help of Professor Y, invents a new anti-barrier to try to trap the shadows, and while they're successful at building a new anti-barrier, they're unsuccessful at trying to capture these shadows. But the family realizes that the shadows aren't really going after Zandrew. They're trying to leave the area, but for some reason, there's an invisible barrier that is blocking them. Zandrew decides to contact his other fellow reviewers, which includes IndieFan, the Reviewer, Magnatrix, and Shades. Zandrew questions whether or not they have encountered a shadow, to which all the reviewers have stated no. This further explains why Zandrew is the only one who has ever encountered these creatures. And during this revelation, Zandrew is then kidnapped by a shadow who he actually had a familiar run-in the past. This was the very first shadow that Zandrew contained within the anti-barrier. This was Pepper. After Pepper's release, Vane gave him another purpose: to eliminate Zandrew once and for all. Zandrew thankfully overpowers Pepper and returns back to his reality. And after this whole ordeal, Zandrew decides to return back to his reviewer ways. At the time of me recording this video, this is all we have for the Zandrew adventures, as Season 4 has yet to be established. But Zandrew will be back later in this video. Coming back to Big Jack Films, Jack utilizes what's left of the FDT, utilizing their cells, and transports himself through various universes. Knowing that another Great War will inevitably happen, he goes through these universes to seek out his very allies. Traveling to the DC universe, Bruce Wayne helps Jack and gives him more FDT cells to further travel through the multiverse to seek out more allies. This is where Jack contacts the hardcore dude to find more parts to the FDT. And if it didn't get any crazier enough, a reviewer by the name of Redland Ranger gets trapped in an alternate version of Alcatraz within Dimension 63, taken over by the Warden who's working with Gabor. Ranger was about to begin a hiatus from the internet before being pulled into this dimension. A ball of light freed Redland Ranger and navigated him out of the prison. As for the status of the King's Gauntlet, Lara freaking Croft contacts Jack and is hired to look for the King's Gauntlet alongside Indiana Jones. This surprising team-up ultimately leads them to find something more than the King's Gauntlet. They end up finding the Infinity Gauntlet. Also, a little behind the scenes fun fact about this storyline: the actor playing Indiana Jones is Kyle Derek McDonald. You may recognize that name because he's the voice actor for Drago in the 3rd Gen Bakugan series. Sometime later, Redland Ranger would contact Jack and inform him about the Warden and Gablar, and now the fact that they have secrets which link to the awakening and revival of the Inuyasha villain Naraku, and it's likely that he's going after someone close to Jack, which causes Jack to travel to the Inuyasha universe to seek out Kikyo. And while Jack was off-world, IndieFan was given the Sword of Jupiter, which allowed him to improve his close-quarter combat skills. The sword was given to him by his close cat Zoe, who unfortunately lost her life off-screen. Angered, IndieFan blamed Crocodile for these actions. But before IndieFan could lay a hand on his arch-nemesis, he is then sent to outer space. Dean then warns IndieFan about an incoming attack from a legion of kaiju, which they fortunately defeat. After the big battle, a holographic message from Jack is sent to IndieFan, as well as a box that contains a kitten, who was being protected by Zoe before they died. This is also where IndieFan was getting the attention of Gablar. But while Jack was able to gather all of his allies, Gablar's forces begin to invade Earth, and all villains from across the multiverse aid in his invasion. Jack returns to his native universe and gathers the other reviewers as well as the fictional heroes to help him fight off against Gablar and his forces. This is probably one of the biggest crossovers within Reviewerverse history, as it not only combines the forces of the other next-gen reviewers, but they also team up with fictional characters from across the multiverse to help them in their war. To quote Super Smash Bros., everyone is here. Let's get a quick rundown, shall we? You have Big Jack Films, Bradley, Indie Fan, Dean, the SSS Kaiju Guard, Josh, Isaac the Media Hunter, Redland Ranger, Huey Toonmore, Dr. Terawatt, Monster Island Buddies, the Nostalgia Critic. Even the Department of Metahuman Control had their own Mechagodzilla that they were constructing behind the scenes under the label Project 7421. And by extension, Indie Fan actually has his own perspective of the Great War. Within the events of Season 3 of Fandemic, we see other reviewers participate in the war, and one of them is Zandrew. And with the additional fictional characters, which include Android 18 and Kikyo, yeah, this was a pretty big battle. And come on, Gabor with the Infinity Gauntlet? Now that's freaking cool. Wait a minute, what? Hold on a sec. So, there are 2 Infinity Gauntlets now in the Reviewerverse? So, one doesn't work, but the other one does. Okay, here's more explanation as to why this is the case. Because most of these fictional characters are traveling through these multi-dimensional waves, this allows items from other universes to flow through the fictional waves so they can still be accessed and utilized through other universes. Which is probably one of the reasons why the Temlins, the beings responsible for the creation of the Contest of Champions, were just able to give out these dangerous artifacts as prizes. And it's kind of funny when you think about it because the Temlins are literal gods. So beings of a higher life form can't utilize other objects from different universes without the need of fictional waves. Quite interesting. But hey, world building, I guess. Thankfully for Jack and the rest of the heroes, they defeat Gabor and his evil forces, and the entirety of the universe is saved. Although there's no time to rest, as Jack continues his quest to look for the King's Gauntlet, and leaves an AI version of himself to continue his review show. And because of the Great War, tons of fictional characters were kinda left behind, which we'll get to much later. After the Second Great War, a new reviewer emerged from the shadows, and their name is Tendo the Diving Seal, a reviewer who specializes in reviewing theme parks. And yes, you're not seeing things. The show is hosted by a seal puppet, or at least in universe an actual seal. So where did they come from, and why did they start making reviews? A long time ago, Tendo was just your average ordinary seal pup who lived with a happy seal family. However, there was a villainous scientist who lived under the sea by the name of Caraquis, who caused terror within Tendo's community, and thus he was separated from his family. Washing up on shore, he was later found by a hooded figure by the name of the Puppeteer. The Puppeteer took care of Tendo. Tendo would grow up within the Puppeteer's household. However, it wasn't until he was much older that Tendo was destined for something greater, becoming a member of the Guardians of Imagination. You see, a long time ago, there used to be a group known as the Guardians of Imagination, and they sealed away an evil being by the name of the Nightmare. And it just so happened that the location of where the Nightmare was sealed just so happened to be Disneyland, located in Anaheim, California. It's also explained that Disneyland wasn't just built on top of a orange grove. Within the Reviewerverse, Disneyland was actually built within a different dimension, and it just so happens that evil forces lurk about within Disneyland. It was during one of Tendo's trips to Disneyland where he found a pin laying on the floor. Tendo returns the pin back home, and the Puppeteer determines that the pins are somehow slowly coming back and are gathering new users to become new members of the Guardians of Imagination. Each of the 7 pins represent a title, and given the fact that Tendo found one of these pins laying around, he ends up becoming the Guardian of Tomorrow. And because of that, Tendo is tasked to look for the other members who may have found the other pins laying around Disneyland. One by one, he ends up finding the other members who were selected by the other pins. And it's also worth noting that during the fight scenes within Tendo the Diving Seal's videos, there's actually an explanation as to why the people in the background are not taking notice of the crazy shit that is happening whenever there's a crazy battle taking place. It's actually kinda creative. Coming back to the Guardians of Imagination, once all of them are gathered, Tendo is getting second thoughts and realizes that he's not willing to risk his own life just because a pin told him so, and thus he removes himself from the rest of the Guardians. As Tendo removes himself from the group, the Guardians of Imagination prepare themselves for the reawakening of the Nightmare. But just as Tendo was ready to give up, he soon finds motivation from another reviewer, a former reviewer that is, in the form of Tony Goldmark, formerly known as Some Jerk with a Camera. Tony convinces Tendo to reunite with the Guardians of Imagination, knowing that Tendo has an ultimate purpose that shouldn't go to waste. With this new mindset, Tendo reunites with the rest of the Guardians and they end up defeating the Nightmare. But just when evil is sealed away, the Guardians of Imagination have to deal with yet another threat. One from Tendo's past. And that is Karaquis, the mad scientist who took away his family and home all those years ago. Tendo warns the other Guardians that Karaquis is dangerous and doesn't want them to encounter her. But then Tendo himself is then kidnapped by one of Karaquis' goons and is taken to her secret base underneath the ocean, where Karaquis explains that she is looking for a really rare material that could power her android army, a mineral called Karaquisium. Tendo is then saved by his friends and returns home, but the Guardians prepare for Karaquis and her next attack, now commanding a full-on android army to her disposal. As Karaquis and her army invade Disneyland, the Guardians of Imagination are able to fend off her army with swift ease. Karaquis escapes, but the Guardians of Imagination lie victorious. Now I do want to cover the next storyline within the Tendo the Diving Seal series, but the storyline is still ongoing. But if you want context to what the next storyline is about, the Guardians of Imagination are then met by a future version of Tendo, who came back in time because it turns out that he wants all the Guardians of Imagination to die, because time travel shenanigans. Also between those events, Indie Fan and Tendo the Seal actually crossed paths and did a collaboration together within Fandemic Season 4. Coming back to Huey Toonmore, his soul was finally reunited with his body, which finally concludes the Huey Soul Saga. As for the other reviewers, Indy had to deal with a serial killer by the name of Martin Grimm broke out of his facility. This was all orchestrated by Gabor as he sent one of his servants to free Martin Grimm. IndieFan eventually defeats Martin Grimm, to which Gabor isn't pleased by. Coming back to Big Jack Films, his quest for the King's Gauntlet ends up in failure, but it turns out that the Department of Metahuman Control and InGen from the Jurassic Park franchise are working together on human cloning. This captures Jack's attention as he travels to the island to investigate, and Jack does whatever it takes to stop them. This is also where we get a very interesting appearance from a raptor that just so happened to be connected with Dr. Terawatt. Apparently this is the same exact raptor who showed up in a Dr. Terawatt video, but I can't show you the reference because, well, I don't have the footage because the footage has been deleted. But yeah, it's the same raptor. Oh, wait. There it is. Disappointed by the execution of the park, Jack returns home, but his buddy Josh decides to show him something that he found at an arcade in Indiana, which so happened to be a Jurassic Park arcade game that Jack had been looking for a really long time. But what about Sean from JT is Reborn? After the Great War, Sean decided to stay on Earth, where he reviewed Halloween Ends. Sean has been reviewing Halloween for a really long time, and now that the Halloween franchise has come to a close, so has his review of the Halloween franchise. However, after his review, he is then attacked by Michael Myers himself and the rest of the Cult of Thorn, led by Kyle Kakron. His dastardly plan is to make Sean and other reviewers forced to watch Star Wars The Last Jedi, to which Sean retaliates. I also forgot to establish that Sean has the ability to transform into the Green Ranger. How did he get this power morpher in the first place? Well, allow me to explain. Within Jack's review of Power Rangers, Zordon actually allowed reviewers to obtain the powers of the Power Rangers. Rather obtaining powers similar to that of the Morphing Grid, they are mainly obtaining powers similar to that within the Super Sentai universe. He ends up defeating the cult and the day is saved once again. However, evil is lurking around the corner, and it may not be over for Sean as he might have to deal with another icon of horror. I also headcanon that this is the same exact Michael Myers that the nerd had to deal with, By extension, it's kind of funny how Michael Myers had to deal with two different reviewers who were able to overpower him, and he just so happened to meet his end by a reviewer who just so happened to have a power morpher. And yeah, that's kind of where the Reviewerverse is at now. Nothing much to say other than the fact that it's still going, but in regards to major plot points and potential crossovers in the future, only time will tell when Gabor will strike again. But regardless, when evil prevails, these internet reviewers will be our last hope. Surprisingly. I mean, this is coming from a creator who was a former space pirate, so nothing's ridiculous at this point.
Spectro, I'm losing focus. I don't know how long this is going to last.
Uni, hold on! I got an idea! Grab hold of the blaster. I'm going to activate a reverse polarity sequence. And combined with your powers, we can reboot everything.
What? How is that going to...
I know what I'm doing. Just trust me on this. I don't care if the universe has to reset. Because if that happens, I just want everyone to live. And for God's sake, if this means erasing my entire existence, then probably that's for the best. Because I'm the destroyer after all. And yeah, I saved many, but I think it's time for me to repay.
Just remember this, Spectro. No matter what happens, you were always a good man.
I know. Let's do this.
Congratulations, you passed the test. This was a long time coming. Ever since 2017, you traveled through the far reaches of the universe, and it led you down a dark path with the destruction of the Gargantua Infinity. But that didn't stop us from seeing your redemption. You may have been the destroyer of worlds, but you've saved this one many times over, making you worthy of its savior. We not only saved this world, but rebooted it. Thus, you helped rebirth Gargantua Infinity, bringing back the lives you lost that day. Although it has been saved, your world is going to look different when you return. But you must find your friends and tell them everything. Because soon enough, another catastrophe will occur, and we need you to stop it. The nerd apocalypse is coming. We're counting on you.
That was a weird transition. Where the hell's Lady Uni? At least I still have the mansion, but other than that, nothing's changed aside... Oh shit! A PS5! And it comes with games? Oh my goodness, I don't even have to pay for one anymore. Oh my god, what is that? Oh, I'm gonna love this universe. What could possibly go wrong? Now, before I end this video, I just want to say thank you guys for watching this 3-part docu-series on the Reviewerverse. This is probably one of the coolest projects I've ever worked on this year. Not because of my hyperfixation towards the Reviewerverse or whatnot, but because I was able to work with a lot of cool people who are a part of the Reviewerverse. And because of that, I'll say this once and I'll say it again. A big shout out to Big Jack Films for helping me out with this project. Without him, this would have never been possible in the first place. And a big shout out to my best friends over in Unicity. Taz, Nat, Justin Matthews, Dylan, Vanell, Chrissy, Lady Uni, and everyone who's helped to make the UCU possible. Thank you guys so much. Also, a big shout out to Matt Burkett, host of the YouTube channel Monstrosities, and formerly known as Apollo Z Hack, for not only giving me insight on his character for the retrospective, but also giving me the blessing to continue his story and continue the legend of the Rever, which I'll talk a lot more in depth later on in this outro. I also want to give a huge shout out to Brock McGinnis, aka Indie Fan, host of Fandemic, for giving me insight on his character lore. And a big shout out for all the Reviewerverse fans who have came to my channel and supported all my content. You guys are the best. And while my character's story is still going on, it does mean the end to the Unicity Connected Universe, aka the UCU. And while the UCU may be over, Spectro will continue his adventures within the Reviewerverse along with his friends, as well as some new allies he will eventually make along the way. The Chronicles of Spectro Season 4 will technically be a reboot of the series, but will still continue the narrative of what was left behind, on top of new situations that my character will have to deal with. Season 4, The Chronicles of Spectro, will be premiering in the beginning of 2025, and we really can't wait to show you guys what we have to offer for the Reviewerverse. And again, please support the following that I have mentioned previously in this video. Their accounts will be linked in the description below. And with that being said, rev up!